guys, and welcome back to Nourishing Routes, the channel where I show you how to love food, adore your body and become your authentic self. Today I'm going to be talking to you about something that I feel is really important to discuss, but a topic that we actually don't talk about an awful lot. That topic is eating disorder recovery. And eating disorder recovery is something that I'm going to be speaking about a lot more in this channel. But I'd also like to start by saying and asking, how on earth do we define recovery? Well, this is a topic that is a bit controversial because a lot of people, by medical professional standards, classify recovery as based on a weight. So for someone who maybe suffers from anorexia or bulimia, or have lost a certain amount of weight, or even for someone who has binge eating disorder and may have gained a certain amount of weight, eating disorder recovery for lots of people has become defined by how much they weigh on a scale, how much they eat in terms of calories, and what their specific behaviours are around food. Now, those things are important, don't get me wrong, but based on my own personal experiences and what I've heard from a lot of other people online and in real life, is that recovery isn't just based around those things at all. And you know, for me, recovery, although I did base it on a weight for so long, thinking that once I get to a healthy BMI, then I'll be well, then I'll be happy, and then I'll be able to get on with my life. That can feel really, really frustrating, because sometimes getting to a healthy weight can feel like such a long distance away in terms of time. And equally, it kind of dismisses the fact that as individuals, we're so much more than what we weigh. And part of the eating disorder anyway, for a lot of people, it's never really about the weight specifically. It's never really about the food. It's actually all about those underneath darker layers that we need to tap into and heal ourselves from within and start to find out who we are as a person. So in today's episode, Getting Back on Track, I'd really like to show you what's been key for recovery to me and what's really helped me to define recovery as such, rather than basing it on a weight. And first of all, I'd like to say why this is important, because for a lot of people, they go to a medical professional who might weigh them on a scale and might tell them that, oh, you're a healthy weight now, or oh, you don't look very ill at all, and so you must be okay. But for someone who struggles still psychologically with issues around food and body, sometimes they can feel as though they're not unwell enough, or that they might need to lose weight or even look unhealthy just to be able to get that help and support, or to feel deserving of support. Now for me, that's really heartbreaking, because even for myself, I felt like that, because I felt I wasn't ill enough for somebody else, because my weight might have not have as plummeted as much as someone else I knew. I felt that, oh well, I must be okay then. But really, in my mind, I was still so caught up in an obsessive cycle around food and body, and looking back, I really wasn't well at all. And for someone who sees a medical professional quite regularly, for example, if you yourself are suffering from an eating disorder, to go into a medical professional's office and be asked firsthand, let's weigh you. Now, I can understand why they do that. It does play a part in recovery, but it also reinforces the idea that your self-worth and your health is based on your weight. So for me, I like to demystify that myth, because going through the whole stages of recovery and coming out the other end, I've realised that recovery is so much more than the weight itself. So without much further ado, let's get into the key things about what I feel recovery really is. So firstly, recovery is actually wanting to eat for more than just fuel or nutrition. A lot of the time, people with eating disorders get so caught up in the fact that food is about health and maintaining a certain weight and fitting into this so-called balanced lifestyle where all foods that are eaten need to be pure and healthy and good for the body. But when you recover from an eating disorder, you realise that food is more than just fuel. And I talk about this a lot in the Nourishing Routes philosophy in general. But if you can eat from a place of enjoyment and allowing yourself to really experience joy and pleasure around food, rather than guilt and feelings of shame. And eating because it fits in line with your social connections and social opportunities, or going out for a meal with friends, that is such a key part of recovery. Because for a long time, my meal plan as such was based around having to eat so many calories to get well. It had to be about eating the perfect foods, the purest of foods, and having the healthiest ingredients. And really, that was kind of just me branching off into another form of disordered eating. It wasn't actually honouring my needs to actually go out and make friends, rekindle memories with food. And at the end of the day, that's what food's all about. It's about having fun, making those connections with other people, and really just being free to just experience all of the things that food brings to the table. So that was number one. What's number two? Well, similar to number one, number two is about eating food without feelings of guilt and shame. Now, even for the average person out there who hasn't had an eating disorder, that can be quite difficult to do, because we've all been taught that food should come with a psychological consequence. So if we eat a cake, we should feel guilty for that and then want to go on a run afterwards or go and burn it off. But that's not how we should be feeling at all around food. For myself, I used to eat foods that were considered as processed and unhealthy as part of a recovery plan. But afterwards, I would beat myself up so much and think I wasn't deserving enough to eat them, and that I needed to compensate in some way or earn the right to be able to experience that pleasure from food. But as I ventured through recovery, I realised that I was allowed to eat what the hell of foods that I wanted based on the fact that they were enjoyable, and that I deserved to eat them without those feelings of negative judgment. I also didn't need to compare what I was eating to other people who might have been on a diet or following some other rigid rigid routine, because that wasn't me and that's not what I needed. And I think if you in recovery can realise that, this is your way of living, you don't have to jump on a health plan or eat foods that are just nutritious for you physically, but just realise that you can enjoy foods without that guilt and shame, because food is really about just fulfilling you up to the full, and not just physically but also psychologically too. So what's number three? Number three has played a huge role in my recovery, which has been able to go out for a meal and not have to pre-plan that meal, worry about that meal, or feel guilty after that meal. As some of you who've suffered from disordered eating or an eating disorder might be able to resonate with, going out with friends and family for a meal can be really anxiety provoking, and going out for a meal should be an enjoyable time. We shouldn't need to go and check the calorie menus, the ingredient lists of the places that we're going out to eat, but just accept that this opportunity has arisen because maybe we're meant to just go out with our friends and family, rekindle some memories and have some fun, not worry about food. I mean, I can count probably on 100 fingers the amount of times that I used to go out for a meal and actually shake before going into the restaurant because I was so worried if they'd give me a big portion, thinking that I had to complete all of the portion, or I'd worry about the calories not being on the menu, and it would just send me in this flurry of panic. And then before I knew it, I just wanted to leave. I didn't even enjoy being there, and I look back and think, gosh, how many years of my life did I just waste thinking about and worrying about food? Thankfully now though, a key part of my recovery has been actually accepting opportunities to go out with family and friends for food, and even spontaneously as well, saying yes to meals out, enjoying it, and just feeling free to order what the hell I want off a menu, rather than searching down and saying, ooh, what's the healthiest thing I can pick, or ooh, what's the lowest amount of calories, because really, we know that is no fun at all, people. So yeah, that's one element of recovery. So what's number four? Number four defining element of recovery has been not placing so much of a focus on the things that I eat, how I look in a mirror and what I weigh on a scale. For a long time they used to be the key defining aspects of my life and my self-worth, where I'd wake up every day, even in the middle of the night, to weigh myself and think that the number that appeared back at me was who I was. And it's so sad to think that anybody can base their self-worth and existence as a human being on a number. But as I went through recovery, I realised, through engaging in different hobbies and activities, that I didn't need to base my self-worth on those things. In fact, they were so insignificant. And recovery starts by realising that you have so much to offer the world than your food intake, because I can guarantee that in each and every one of us there's something inside that I call a gift, and that really we're meant to use that gift to the best of our abilities, whether it's, you know, giving a smile to someone else or being able to help other people. They're huge things in recovery. And the next point tying in with that is to actually take up hobbies and activities that are far removed from food and exercise. You'll probably know already, if you have suffered from an eating disorder, that it's so tempting to want to engage in activities that revolve around food, whether that's cooking, watching cooking programs, or watching other people cook. It's all about the food, the food, the food. But that ties into the fact that we feel like we need to define ourselves by food. But when you start to recover for real, food starts taking on less significance in your life. And actually, the hobbies that you used to love, or hobbies that you want to love or learn to love, start to come into your life. So, for example, I started playing the piano again. I started cross-stitching again. I started colouring again. I started volunteering, which was a huge thing because I realised that everybody around me wasn't so obsessed around food, and that they were still happy because they were giving their positive energy to other people and getting so much of that positive energy back, if that makes sense. And it's kind of like a light bulb switching off, because I thought, oh my god, all these years I've wasted thinking that people are going to judge me on the thing, like how I look and what I weigh and what I eat. When in reality, that is so not true. We judge people through the actions that they take and their mission in life. Like, I'd rather know, if I was making a friend or meeting a partner, like, what's your mission in life? What are your hobbies and your interests? What make you passionate? And guaranteed, very rarely is that healthy eating. It's mostly about, you know, finding a purpose to give something back to other people, or finding a purpose that makes you happy, whether it's expressing your creativity in a certain way, or finding your career, like, in life. Like, what is it that lights you up as a human being? I think when you find that, you start to realise that recovery becomes a bit more real and tangible, because you can imagine a whole life outside your eating disorder which has defined you for so long. Because I know how much of a struggle it is, and it can be, for someone with an eating disorder who for so long has been categorised as somebody who's ill and who needs looking after. But actually they're not that person at all. That's just one part of them. And they get associated with so many recovery support groups, seeing mental health professionals, that when it comes to moving out those circles and, you know, finding their life, it can feel a bit anxiety provoking to leave that identity behind and say, you know, that's no longer a big part of me anymore. But despite how scary that is, and it was for me, I can tell you it's one of the most empowering things ever, because it just floats away. It's not like as scary as you think it will be, that you're not identified as someone with an eating disorder anymore. You just think, it was in the past, it's made me part of who I am, but it's no longer who I am in general. So yeah, that's a big part of real recovery for me, is not placing your whole identity around food and weight and your eating disorder. Another key aspect of real recovery is to be more flexible around food and take opportunities when they come to you. So, like I said before, being able to go out for a meal with friends just spontaneously, that's part of real recovery. Being able to, I was doing this the other day, baking something in my kitchen and just being able to lick the raw cake mixture from around the bowl and just put it in my mouth and not feel bad about that, that's part of real recovery. It could come in the form of when you're at work or at school and someone offers you a chocolate, and instead of saying no, because in your mind you think it doesn't fit into my meal plan, you can actually accept that chocolate and go, yeah, because I just want to eat a piece of chocolate, man, there's nothing wrong with that. And the same goes for meal planning too. Like, if you can eat not based on distinct rigid times without feeling anxious about it, that's really empowering to do too. Because I used to have to eat at certain times, and even a few minutes outside those times would fill me with anxiety. But when you start embracing real recovery, you can see that food's not to be eaten really rigidly in that way. Sometimes we might end up eating our lunch at 3 o'clock, or sometimes we might have a brunch at 11 instead of breakfast, Or sometimes if we're going out travelling, we might have to have breakfast at 6 a.m. instead of 8 a.m. So the more you can be flexible, the more you can start to revolve yourself around your life rather than your life revolving around food, which is such an energy drain. So finally, the final point I'd like to touch on, what I define as real recovery, is that you've started to make time for self-care. And this only hit me actually just less than a couple of years ago, but I began to notice that more and more of my day I was spent, actually looking after myself genuinely. I wasn't like trying to put on weight for another person or to please my family. I was actually doing it because I wanted to feel well, I wanted to feel energised, and I also started to engage in activities that I knew would re-energise me and that made me feel happy. I knew that all fitted in alignment with like the art of being a self-compassionate human being, which I think we all are at heart. We just lose our path along the way because society, as we know, places all these pressures on us. But real recovery is about breaking away from that and realising we're all deserving of self-care. And in some ways, although I wouldn't wish an eating disorder upon anyone, and I hate what I went through, I don't think it was a positive part of my life, but if it taught me anything, it's taught me that I don't need to be a certain way or neglect myself in order to feel like a worthy or good enough individual. It's actually taught me that it's so important to just stop. Yes, just stop. Even if it means leaving a career or a job or your work or even taking time out of school, but to just stop and make time for yourself, because no one can make time for yourself other than yourself, and you get so many rewards back just by giving yourself that self-care. Because I always say, if you give a penny to yourself in the form of self-care, you're always then able to give that energy back out. So 1 coin goes in and 2 coins go out. And it's very much the same with real recovery, because the more you spend time in self-care rather than revolving your life around food, then you're able to give that positive energy back to others and find out more meaning in life and actually move away from that identity that completely defined you for how long, or whether it's months or even years, that you suffered with an eating disorder. And slowly but surely you realise that you do deserve to be loved, and there's no one better to love you than yourself.